Tonight, we have 4 speakers in our panel, a group of Keene State faculty who've been working as a discussion group on exploring anti-racism for the better part of a year and a half now. And it's a discussion that's done more than just explore the concept. This group has been hard at work designing and actually getting past a curriculum proposal for a new major in anti-racist studies. Tonight, we're going to find out what anti-racism is and maybe learn a bit about how a person could study that if they wanted to at Keene State, and maybe a little bit about how institutions like our campus can bring these principles into practice. Presenting tonight will be Karen Jennings, a professor of psychology, Denise Bertstead, a professor of environmental studies and sustainability, Patricia Pedroza Gonzalez, professor of women's and gender studies, and Larry Welkowitz, a professor of psychology. I'm going to hand it over to Karen, who will start and lead for the panel, and maybe come back when it's question time at the end of their talk. So Karen, it's all yours.
Great, thank you, Mike. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get going. So folks, welcome. Thank you for coming. Please feel free to chime in, via the chat or raising your hand. All of that is welcome. I'll just be providing a brief overview of our thoughts, the guiding principles, the working ideas we've been grappling with this semester, well, this year and a half, just to give you a flavor of what we're thinking about. And so, and then each of the panel members will talk about their calling to do anti-racist work. And then we'll talk a bit about barriers and other issues and have a conversation. And once again, the panelists will each offer their perspectives, and then we can open up for questions. Just as in housekeeping, one of our team members can't attend, Kaya Rompiper, who is, her family is grappling with a very serious emergency, but she was integral to the work we've been doing and the work we've been talking about. I just wanted to lift her up as another person in our team. So here we go. What is anti-racist studies? Let's just think about an overview of what we're talking about, how we conceptualize anti-racist studies, and the major is really a call to action and an invitation to participate in developing a culture that prioritizes interdisciplinary consciousness, whose methodology and skill sets create truly a holistic anti-oppression curriculum. That's really this higher goal that we have. We imagine this program to be involving really the trifecta of intellectual, affective, and behavioral targets, including discoveries in these areas. And part of the intellectual work is an analysis and critique of dominant bodies of knowledge. That's a really important piece of this program, that type of analysis and critique. Larry and I are very familiar, and other panelists, I think Dr. Pedroza Gonzalez, very familiar with this idea of analyzing canon and building on canon and creating new ideas based upon this analysis of canon. And this is really at the heart of what we're thinking about with our anti-racist program. And this is the invitation piece. We're asking all of you, faculty, staff, and students to engage with us in these larger conversations. You are all desperately needed. And the question is, what calls to you is the question. And we're hoping that tonight you'll hear a calling with this work. And so we all have a calling, and we're hoping that we'll excite you for your calling as well. Things considered in this work, just to give us a brief overview. So we're building the mechanisms to try to co-create these types of work. We're trying to frame it in some guiding questions. How does the Keene State College community, everybody, faculty, staff, and students, work together to create both the curricular and co-curricular experiences within an anti-racist perspective? That's the larger goal. We've been grappling with all kinds of questions. why now is the question. Can we wait? Do we believe we cannot wait? And why might that be as part of that larger conversation that we're having? So how can we generate an integrated cross-campus curricular and co-curricular anti-racist program and connect courses and student experiences within these perspectives is another thing that we're grappling with. And then the question for all of us, how are we finding ourselves or not in these ways of thinking? And if we're not, how can we invite you in? Because we want you to be part of this larger process. And what can we do to contribute to this program at the college? So these are just a kind of a summary of the things that we're grappling with and really need your help in terms of moving forward and finding answers to some of these questions. I thought we'd talk a bit about the chronology of our work, just to frame why we're doing this and why now. Frankly, friends, colleagues, we're working in response to real events in our lives, socioeconomic and political events, like the murders, right, of Miss Taylor, Mr. Arbery, Mr. Floyd, right? These are sentinel events that really ushered the call for us. And I think the call for many of us in many different ways across campus and, across our nation and really the world. So what are some of the other issues that also galvanized us? I don't know how many people know that the state of New Hampshire, our legislature, has approved in a budget bill limits to free speech about anti-oppression work. The target is K through 12 education, but guess what, folks? This infringement on freedom of speech affects our capacity in a public institution in New Hampshire to promulgate training in anti-oppression. So while the legislation targeted K through 12, it has a broad chilling effect. In fact, the city attorney general in Keene was planning with Mayor Hansel a whole array of anti-oppression events. And he began to question if he can do that because of this legislation. Okay, and it's called divisive concepts. We are one state of several states in the nation who have passed this kind of language. So really a chilling effect on free speech and of course academic freedom. The college, we know, has gone through some massive turbulence and shifts that directly affected the anti-racist studies program and other programs. And so I think we're still shivering in our timbers, frankly, friends and colleagues, relative to all of these changes. And we're trying to move forward in terms of prioritizing and centering our students' well-being and their experiences. Yet I think we're all shivering in our timbers still, relative to all the things that have happened. And of course, we can't forget, our students have asked us to do this work. Remember the student petition, where I believe, and my colleagues can correct me, I believe at least 1/3 of students signed a petition demanding that we provide anti-oppression education and that they see themselves more clearly in terms of the people that were heading the petition, that these students see themselves more clearly in our curriculum. And so this is one of the big drivers for the work that we have been doing. And I didn't know, we don't know if you know this, but we have collected an archive of staff, faculty, and student writings, their reflections on race. And if anybody ever wanted to see this archive, we're trying to figure out how to make it accessible to everybody. But we have some very really incisive, insightful, powerful narratives of first-person experiences around race with our students, staff, and faculty. So there's a lot of richness here. And in this richness, there are a lot of questions and a lot of desires for the college to move forward in our work. We've been doing this work for a long time on campus, and I think we're at a critical juncture, perhaps, in moving the work forward in an exponential way, perhaps. And so the purpose really of our our panel is let's talk. Our panelists will talk, and we're inviting you to talk as well. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There is a chat. Co-curricular means what the things, the activities that students do outside the classroom. So it's a great question. Thank you, Janet. Really appreciate that. And so, Dr. Welkowitz, you will be taking it away.
Great, thanks. You know, Karen, as you were speaking, I remembered this moment from a few years ago, just a few years ago. I hadn't heard the term anti-racist. And you said to me, we were talking about someone who said, well, I'm not, defended themselves and said, I'm not racist, I'm not racist. And you said to me, it's not enough to not be racist. You need to be, it's important to be anti-racist. And that changed everything for me. That was like a guy, you know, that idea, being anti-racist, not just, oh, I'm not racist, because then all sorts of paths open up. So I just want to talk about two perspectives that have guided my, you know, that have encouraged me to get involved with this program. One is my experience as a New Hampshire State House representative. I am, to all of you students out there, many of you are my constituents. I am the elected state representative from this area in and around the college. If you live in the dorms, I'm your state rep. You got a complaint, you can call me. Not that I want to take all your phone calls about that, but I will. As a state rep and a fairly new state rep, I've only been at it for a year. I was sort of shocked at what my initial experiences were. Last January, it started last December, really. I thought that this was going to be a kind of a civil experience, and it was absolutely the opposite, not a civil experience. In fact, someone told me that John Oliver mentioned New Hampshire last night or something in a show. You heard this? What did he say? Can you tell me what he said?
I think that it's Florida with foliage, I think was the phrase.
The first thing he said. Then he said something about like New Hampshire is like now one of the most repressive or fascist states, except for Texas, he said. You know, it's really unbelievable what's happened just in the past year, and you need to know about it, right? I sit on one of the committees. We all sit on different committees that we're assigned to, the Federal and Veterans Affairs Committee. And one of the first things that happened, besides a lot of weird banter that seemed inappropriate from the leadership, I am in the, just so you know, I'm in the minority party. I am on the Democratic side. We got killed in the election, except at the very top of the ticket. And this happened across the country. And this is why we're seeing these divisive concepts, legislations propping up across the country now from extremists who got elected in the last election. And so here I am on this committee, and one of the first resolutions was for states' rights, to push for states' rights, and the federal government can't tell us what to do. And of course, we're outnumbered, so we lose this vote. And I'm asked to write the minority report. And I write, my initial report got rejected by the chairman. He said, you're too nasty. And it's like, I can't believe that you passed this. You know, they quote Jefferson and Madison and all these early, you know, pioneers of the Declaration of Independence and stuff to say why the Constitution says that the states have all the rights. Now, of course, this was really the basis for the South and the Civil War, right? The South said we have the right to have slaves, right? So I had to remind the committee in my minority report that the North had won the war. That line got cut out of my report. I remind my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, the North won the war, and that there have been amendments since the Civil War, the 13th, 14th, 15th amendments, the amendments that freed the slaves, gave blacks the right to vote, eventually amendments that gave women the right to vote. These are a part of the Constitution now. They strengthen the federal government. They were completely ignored, like it didn't happen. Like it didn't happen. It was remarkable. Now, if that was only it, and then we get to divisive concepts. This is now the law in the state of New Hampshire. Public school teachers, you can't have discussions about race and sexism. Sexism and racism doesn't exist. doesn't matter how many examples we gave. So I testified against HB 544 at the Senate hearing, and I said, if you pass this, and inspired by Dr. Jennings, I said, if you pass this, I teach at Keene State College, and at that time it included colleges. I said, I will defy it. And the head of the committee hit his gavel and said, next. That was it. It's part of the public record. It's like, really, is this really happening? Do we have creeping fascism in the state of New Hampshire and racism? Shortly after that, State Representative Dawn Johnson posts things on Twitter, one of which said, riggers and Jews fix the election, with pictures of stereotype people, a Jewish stereotype with a guy with a big nose and stuff. Dawn Johnson, parenthetically, now has a whole federal Republican Party coming into Laconia to support her. She's running for mayor of Laconia. Nothing happened to her. So we went from, we had legislation and we have this erosion of civility that is beyond the pale, right? Beyond the pale. So that's one of many things happening at the state level that you should know about, because this is the state that we're living in. Then the next thing is me as a psychologist. What do I make of all this as a clinical psychologist? And look, I could go on for a long time, but I'm just going to say a couple of things. One is that, as a behaviorally oriented psychologist, I see that there are certain, what B.F. Skinner called verbal communities, and they reinforce certain ideas. And so there are ideas that get injected into certain communities of people. And in New Hampshire, I think we're particularly vulnerable to certain ideas, right? We're the whitest state in the country, I think. I think we're like 96, 97% Caucasian in the state. So other people move in, some refugee families, immigrant families move in. And I went to pick up my daughter at Harlow's Farm. This is just a couple of years ago. She was working, picking fruits and vegetables. She was the only white person picking vegetables. And some guy said to me, those Mexicans are taking all those jobs. And I said, they're not Mexicans, they're Jamaicans. And one is my daughter, and she's Caucasian. And just this idea that there's Mexicans and they're not even Mexicans was weird. And that they're taking these jobs away. Jamaicans have been picking fruits and vegetables in New England for about 75 years. They're the primary people that pick the apples in the fall. It's an incorrect idea that immigrants are taking jobs. Quite the opposite. It's quite the opposite. If you ask anyone who has an economics knowledge, they know that it is necessary to build our economy, to bring more people in, and to have a diverse workforce, et cetera. So all of these ideas are reinforced. Why are people so alienated and vulnerable to these ideas? That's interesting. And I think one thing I'll say is out of fear that other people are going to change their way of life. That having a same-gendered marriage law is somehow going to threaten their heterosexuality, or that their jobs are going to all be taken by different people and they'll be left with nothing. Those are false ideas, but they're fed and they're reinforced by these verbal communities. I'll stop there, but thanks. Hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Walkowitz. Really powerful and insightful. Dr. Pedroza, would you mind taking it away? I think you are next.
All right, can you see my screen? All right. Thank you everybody in the panel, and thank you the organizers and coordinators. Thank you for the opportunity to share some ideas here with you. And so for me, it's really hard to be brief, but I will do my best. I'm managing here my time, but if I need time, somebody help me, because I appreciate so much the introduction that Dr. Karen Jennings did, because that place my sentiment in like more than my call. It's very hard for me to separate what is my call right now, that what has been my job in the last 25 years, at least in the United States. And so I am a feminist educator long ago, before even coming to the United States and before start working at Keene State College, which I start working exactly in 2000. And so as immigrant brown woman, my life drastically changed after September 11 in terms of learning how my brownness and perception about being a woman from Afghanistan changed. And so I'm Mexican. I was born in Mexico. And so some days I feel myself 80% American, 20% Mexican, but 100% Latina, because Latina is the multiple identity that defines me inside of the United States. Or sometimes I feel myself 90% Mexican and only 10% American, but 100% Latina, because, and so my students that know me in my classes, they know I define myself because identities move. Identities are categorizations that are not fixed. And so there is anti-racist pedagogy there as a field. There is at least 300 there is at least 3 decades of scholarship of people that have graded and have decided to take a stand in chief, what Dr. Karen said, the canon, what means a dominant narrative. And clearly, anti-racist teaching is feminist teaching. Feminism as philosophy, as theoretical account, takes in account for basic categorizations to start discussing how identities are placed in this planet, because it's not only the United States, in this planet, because gender is across time, across historical time, across cultures, across societies, across political regimens, good or bad. Gender exists as categorization. Gender, race, sexuality, and class had been 4 basic categorizations in feminist teaching, where we start analyzing how humans are cast and classified based in these identities, which become political. And political means, like, according in these categorizations, we have access to citizenship, we have access to school, we have access to services, we have access to many things. So I wrote here the idea conflict and collaboration that belongs to Angela Davis. And I wanted to say that because I will close with that phrase. And so for me, being an anti-racist educator means permanently living in conflict and collaboration. And hopefully I am able to share that. Terminology or words that we use traditional in feminist teaching is de-learn, deconstruct, revisit, undoing, decolonizing, intersectional analysis, etc., etc. But permanently what we do in feminist studies is really unlearning everything practically that we have learned about politics and societies. And so those words usually are because the oppressed, that means the ones that are not only represented, is because nobody asks us how to be represented, but all of us that don't belong, all of us the primitive, all of us the indigenous, all of us described as inferior, all of us excluded, all of us not represented, all of us non-qualified, we the others, the aliens, el mundo zurdo, that is the left word, todos los callados, todos los omitidos, todos los otros, everything that represents otherness, it's at the center of how we start analyzing categorizations of race, class, sexuality, ethnicity, etc. And so this is not only unlearning, this really requires to take a political stand. And so when we want to take a political stance, what that means, women gender studies has been in academia now for so long, since the 70s, at least officially speaking. And so we have learned in our path that it's different to take the political stand than just adding subjects of studies. For example, it is very different to take the political stand and be immersed in confronting, in fighting the battle, really fighting every day, that just start teaching, for example, women and music, women and history, women and cooking, women and children, because and so women were included all of a sudden as a subject of study, but without questioning the mechanisms of power that create oppression, discrimination, exploitation. So it's where we enter, like we want to teach, but we don't want to fight. We want to teach, but we want to be nice. So it enters in an interesting conflicts and contradictions. And believe me, this is a permanent conversation inside of feminist pedagogies. But and so what that's really, and clearly, I really would love to know how many students are here tonight. How many students are? Because I'm dreaming to have this conversation, but with the students, I'm very honest. Because as a student, okay, good. As a students, I am very honest. I have been teaching these topics for so long, and sometimes students are taking their classes to get a wonderful degree. And so sometimes when I talk about these ideas, the students say, can you just tell me how many pages is the assignment for next time? And I understand that. I respect that so much, because you are very busy students and you are taking many classes. And I know sometimes what I'm teaching you, it's probably not something that you see can you apply immediately. And so as a student, please know that there is an intention when we create the syllabus. We have the power to change the syllabus. We have the power to decide what content we teach. And so what means to create a syllabus that really want to address these kind of mechanisms? Every time that you use sex to oppress, you create sexism. Every time that you use race to exploit, you create racism. Every time that you use the heterosexual privilege, you create homophobia. Every time that you don't give access to everybody, you create classism, because class is about access. And so we create these mechanisms. Sometimes we are born and already the mechanisms were there, but just we perpetuate and still living in that kind of society. And sometimes we question that, sometimes not. And usually oppression is felt until it touches your body. Many times does not touch your body, and is very, very difficult to connect with that. So engaging in this active questioning many times requires a political stand, no like adding more subjects. And so I can tell you that, yes, in the design of curriculum, yes, it's not by accident that you don't learn about sexism. It's not by accident that you don't learn about some contents. For example, as at the beginning in the introduction of the panel, well, we are together again wanted to revise the kind of teaching that we do at King State College, because yes, there were very sad events that again was like so difficult to accept that this is still happening. But if you or I start thinking about racist or brutal racism because George Floyd was murdered, well, in a curriculum that is designed to teach others, I will say that it's at least documented, like since 1706. Already we can read about the first police patrols around the plantations with the slaves. And so does not require so much imagination to even imagine, to think, or to see the visual picture, what it means to be a police border patrol taking care of slaves. And so there is it just shows that there are almost 300 years where this kind of police brutality is happening. And so that is different. And I think that we learn to repeat like, oh, I know this is not new. I know this is not new. Okay, and so how seriously we are addressing this. And so Dr. Larry mentioned that, of course, thinking about these starts bringing fears, start bringing like la la la, but I will say myself, I just teach history. I'm just teaching historical facts. Even sometimes I don't have the chance to share all my opinions. And so I said this kind of thinking, this kind of ideas, this kind of content has been at the center of women gender studies. And so we said, as we say, we permanently are deconstructing, de-learning. It's permanently. However, also because we have wonderful theories, we have a lot of concepts that belong to this body. And one that I will say is at the center of the time is this intersectionality concept that is an analytical tool. So despite that you may read what it says, but I won't go to the three last lines. What means when you enter in thinking on intersectionality? For example, race and gender. We teach in women gender studies about race and gender. And so we start thinking that it's like, oh, I'm seeing issues of race plus issues of gender. And it's like gender plus race, or gender plus sexual identity, or race plus class. And so we start seeing this, like adding where we want to see where people are excluded, where people are oppressed, how that mechanism is working in society. But and so it's not just plus. What about if we can say gendered racism? It's like already all gender categorizations already had been racialized. So how gender is racialized and the consequences of this. And so for feminist studies, I can tell you that many educators across different countries, which I said, what is the best, to start with gender or start with race? And it's impossible to separate. If you never have understood sexism, it will be very difficult that you understand racism. And if you never have understood racism, it will be very difficult that you understand sexism. And so that is a kind of intersectional thinking. Now, again, if I will have the opportunity to hear is like, okay, students, do you care about it? When you are in classes, will you be interested in thinking about it? And guess what? Probably you will say, no, just tell me how many pages I need to do in the assignment and what I need to do to graduate as soon as possible and what kind of classes I need to take in the summer, because you are here doing a kind of work. And so that is why I said, no, this is a political stand. This is in addition of what you are doing. How are you thinking in these questions? And it's what I said, I work women gender studies. And so I work with all majors. You can be a mathematics major and women gender studies. You can be a psychology major and women gender studies. You can be sociology and women gender studies because you want to be a professional in a field, but this is a kind of thinking that obviously you can integrate if you are open to integrate that. And so how can I start doing this if I never thought about it? Well, as teacher or as learner, a student, yes, we need to begin with a personal reflection. We need to begin with interrogating, we use this word, your positionality. Where do you want to stand? Review our positionality. Because many times the teachers, we are great saying, I'm just here to teach you. I am neutral. I'm not taking positions. That in feminist analysis does not exist. If you are a human being, you have been socialized, you have a position. You have the power to select your ideas, and our ideas are based in our own bias, are based in our own paradigms, are based in our own background, are based in our religion, are based in our family traditions. We are not neutral when we create knowledge. That is a feminist principle. And of course, is debatable. Of course, everything in feminism is debatable. Nobody, no feminist educator will tell you that you need to agree with us. And so how to learn to be critical. And here is where clearly I will start connecting conflict and collaboration, because Keene State College, obviously as an institution, values critical thinking. And I said, are we really opening ways to be critical thinkers, to be multiple evaluators, to learn different paradigms? And sometimes I'm not sure. Sometimes I'm not sure. And so what are anti-racist skills? Well, first, after I have my reflection, I have been thinking, if I am interested in this, what I want to develop. And so this does not differentiate with any other class that you may take, because I will say that in all classes, we are telling you students, like, learn, use your curiosity, learn, be there. But for example, here, if we know very well that we entering in discussing ideas, how one has learned to listen respectfully, for example, what that means. And so I will say that whatever anti-racist class needs to connect with these kind of skills. And as you see, anything here, it says, by having this skill, you will get this kind of job. You will get a job. I'm totally sure you will get a job. This is vision of the kind of job that you may do. This is the kind of professional. It is like, really, are you invested in this way of thinking? In addition of that, of course, that you will get a job, and I'm totally sure. And I believe that all our students will be heavily, heavily, heavily successful. And so why conflict and collaboration? Well, first, I'm a teacher, and so I'm assuming this is recorded. I need to give you the definition of intersectionality, the shortest. I need to give you the definition of women of color, because honestly, I follow feminist legacy. And I am so happy that we are discussing about this. Sad that it is in social events. All revolutions are based in social events. And the social events in history, through all humanity history, had been painful, had been by killing people to other people. And so I cannot say, oh, I'm happy that the social events happen again. No, I know. But I'm so happy because that means the movement continues. That means the questioning continues, the activism continues. And so in that regard, of course, that I'm a woman of color in the United States. And this means a scholarship, a specific methodology, a specific questions that we brought to academy. And we had been there more than 30 years ago with our own methodologies. And so I need to say that because it's a legacy. That means for me, this is the legacy why I'm an anti-racist educator. And regarding conflict and collaboration, I belong to a program that has been eliminated at Keene State College. And so conflict and collaboration, I learned that as doctoral student with Angela Davis, when I was really feeling that academia does not value scholars of color. And so I was like seriously questioning myself why I'm investing this incredible amount of money paying a doctoral degree when I know very well I will never be recognized as an intelligent scholar. And she said, well, we know that. However, this is the point. There are students that need us. There is a lot of education that we can do. And of course, you can drop the doctoral program, or you can come and live with all of us. Because I am Angela Davis. I can tell you that sometimes they put me there because I'm Angela Davis already. But they agree with me? No. I was welcome? Never. And so some of us need to fight just even to belong. And so this conflict and collaboration in itself is a methodology because I think that it is very hard right now to be a feminist scholar working in an institution that puts me as a number, that it's telling me, like we're in economical crisis. I know that we are in economical crisis at Keene State College, but the economical crisis does not substitute the commitment with education. And so these kind of classes have been happening in Keene State College. If you never wanted to see that, that's bad. But right now, we are already eliminating classes that provide these perspectives. And at the same time, we're inviting people to talk about this. So it's really conflicted. And I say that because that's not minimize my commitment to education, to critical education, but it's really weird navigating in that regard. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pedroza Gonzalez. Really powerful. You really artfully discussed the challenges, the skills, pathways forward. So thank you so much. So a student asked a question. Christopher, did you raise his hand? Christopher, did you want to ask a question?
No. Professor Gonzalez asked if there were students listening.
Okay.
Did a virtual raise my hand, so.
Perfect.
Sorry, thank you.
No, thank you so much. Thank you. And I just want to respond quickly to a chat, and then we can have Dr. Birchstead really talk with us about her perspectives and her calling. Okay.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I'm clicking buttons on my screen, and I hope in just a moment that will look like one big slide. So thank you all for being here, and thank you folks who've helped frame this. I want to keep my remarks short. I think we're going to close up soon on our time together, so I will keep these a little bit brief. I have a few slides to share just to sort of provide another perspective on why anti-racism, and highlighting some of, or providing an example anyway, for what Dr. Jennings described about the need for all faculty, all members of all disciplines to be involved in this. I am here at Keene State College as a professor in the Department of Environmental Studies and Sustainability Studies, as introduced. And I come here actually as before I started my career as an academic, I had a previous life as a consulting engineer. I used to work in consulting as an engineer in water resources, working on ecological restoration. And here I am in a Venn diagram showing that. So I have a background that includes, as shown in this, and I hope you can see my cursor moving on the screen, but if you can't, in that bottom right corner of my Venn diagram is a picture of actually a machine from the National Guard helped work on one of these projects that I had designed. It was a river restoration project where a dam was removed to restore the river for the fish. And speaking of indigenous issues, this is actually the first river that was colonized by the English. This is Town Brook in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And the dams destroyed the fish that were a critical food source for the indigenous people, the Wampanoag, at that location. So just a moment of just insight into this intersection of who is in control of the land and how decisions are made about the land. But back to the story of myself for a moment and my call to anti-racism. Excuse me, the phone is ringing. So you'll hear the answering machine potentially in a moment. To do this, I've really, the point of this diagram here is that I'm a physical scientist and an engineer. My advanced degrees are in ecology and geoscience, to think about this concept of restoring places in the environment that have been harmed. And so the most obvious question about this is, okay, so what are we restoring to? We recognize something has happened, there's been some harm, and so what was there before? And to understand that, there's this concept of baseline condition. And so the problem is, as Dr. Pedroza Gonzalez already explained, there's this erasure of the people who, in particular, in this case, are indigenous, people who are oppressed in any way. And in this case, in the field of ecological restoration, in the canon, I dare say, in the other word that Dr. Jennings had introduced, the people who were here are erased, and there's an idea of pristine wilderness. And as we work to restore land, to restore harm that's been done, there's a perception that we need to go back to this pristine state that did not include humans, which is an entirely false perception. There is just zero evidence of any sort of pristine wilderness, unless if you're talking about the continent of Antarctica. But outside of Antarctica, every place on Earth has been actively stewarded by humans. There is no such thing as pristine wilderness. This is, showing an example published by the MIT press reader, an example of Yosemite Valley, but you can look at any place on land, and if there are no people there, it's because they were taken away. It's because they were forced out. If you find a place of wilderness, you're looking at, I dare say, to use words that are very serious and very important, you're looking at an act of genocide. When you find a place without people, it means the people have been removed as a whole. And so it's important not only to recognize what this baseline assumption means, this baseline of pristine wilderness, and there's a second point, which is that those indigenous people of the land lived in relationship with the land for millennia. And today in our world now, as I'm sure almost everyone on this Zoom call has at least heard something about, we are in crisis of losing the biodiversity of our planet. Plants and animals are going extinct at rates that are rarely seen except when there's been mass extinctions in the geologic past. We're in the midst at the rates of a mass extinction. It hasn't finished yet, it's only starting, but at the rates that we're at, this will be a mass extinction at the level of, say, the dinosaurs. There's been a few on the planet history. And the biodiversity of the planet is managed by indigenous people. So not only when we see this myth of wilderness, we're looking at acts of genocide and erasure that are very, very serious, but we are also looking at places where the knowledge developed over millennia, built in relationship with these ecosystems, has been lost. So as a person in environmental studies, and again, coming at it from this very physical, very both engineering and based in biology questions about just the land that we live on, the answers to those questions result in understanding people, and in this case, particularly indigenous people who have been here in the Northeast since the glaciers melted. As the glaciers melted, the people came, and the ecosystem that evolved here evolved in conjunction with humans with active management. And the management isn't the right word. That was a slip. I try to use the word stewardship, which is a much better word. It's evolving in the spirit of reciprocity with a deep relationship. And frankly, as the understanding, as you explore indigenous understanding, this is because they are the people of the land are recognizing the land as kin. We'll use the term casually Mother Earth, and this is a genuine mother and cousin and brother and grandfather. The water is animate, the rocks are animate and kin. And so I'd like to pause also for a moment to just have sort of insert a teeny little land acknowledgement as part of this. The land that I am on is part of the Dawnland Confederacy, the Wabanaki Confederacy. part of the Pennacook Nation, the Abenaki Nation, who stewarded this land for millennia. And it's important for me to recognize that and the erasure and genocide that accompany that, as well as recognize and acknowledge and honor the stewardship that has been provided for millennia, that we, myself and others who care to, can learn from. I would like to make one other comment about this. My call comes out of these questions of ecological restoration. But I also work in this role as a professor in sustainability studies. And it's really important to recognize that this requires all people if we want to be not extinct, frankly. We all need to be a part. However, the folks who are represented are almost all look like myself. They almost all are white. Very few other racial categories are represented. And if I had more time, I would be asking folks, why might that be? And one of the most common responses that people will say is that, well, people who are of some other fill in the blank, marginalized people, the poor, racial categories, Black, brown, Asian, they don't have time. They have too many worries. They don't have time. They can't worry about the environment. It's not that important. I'll hear tropes about, welfare moms sort of thing when faced with this question, why do people look so white? And the reality is that it's actually entirely opposite. And I hope you can bear with me with actually showing a scientific graph. Again, I'm coming at this from a very, very sort of rational, physical perspective. And so the things that call me look like this often. This is a graph showing the results of surveying people in different categories. By the way, race is a totally fake construct. There's a lot of really harmful things about putting people in these categories. And there's a lot of really helpful things about understanding how identity intersects with perception of people's opinions. So people in all of these racial categories and class, there's poor versus wealthy, and age, older versus younger, and gender, men versus women only. People in all of these categories took this survey and were asked, how do you perceive people in these other categories care about the environment? So people who were poor were asked, how do you perceive of people in all of these categories, including in the poor category? How much do you perceive that people in those categories care? And everybody who answered this survey, when those results are lumped, by the way, this is just a survey. You could do a meta-analysis, and this is such a common result. This is not a unique cherry-picked study. This is standard. This is normal. People who are poor are perceived as caring very little about environment, very low level of environmental concern. And yet, when they self-report how concerned they are, they identify their income class, the poor care more than almost anybody except for the Latinx category. They care the most and are perceived as caring almost the least. White folks are the only category here that is perceived as caring more about the environment than they actually do. And in fact, in these racial categories, white folks care the least. The wealthy care less than the poor as well. So this study was the reason I'm showing this one is because this is the one that broke this open for me. I was subject to all of those same myths and misperceptions for the reasons that folks like Dr. Pedroza Gonzalez just framed very clearly about how we end up thinking this way. And I realized that I was completely wrong and really missing the point. And not only do people who are not people of color, not only do people of color care more about the environment and have greater levels of environmental concern, they are much more likely to take action. In this case, this is a study about global climate change. How likely are you to take action to reduce global warming was the question that was asked. And again, white folks are the least likely to either be actively participating or expecting that they would participate. So that's my call. That's what I'm working on right now, and why I'm a part of this anti-racism studies major. And just to put it in, very, very clear terms, to deal with these questions about ecological restoration and environmental sustainability, the only way to address it is to take an anti-racism lens. So I'll leave it with that, and thank you very much for the time and attention.
Thanks, Dr. Birchstead. Really, really fabulous, sobering, and riveting simultaneously. Thank you so much. I just want to lift up a quote, really powerful quote. I'm sure you all see it in the chat, but I think we should just spend a minute focusing on it. A favorite quote that I used in my class today was from a farmer from the first Earth Day. If we don't have equality of persons, we will have equality of extinction, right? So, wow, takes your breath away. So thank you so much. I thought I have just a few remarks, and then we do have time to go through one more round of the panelists, and we do have time for questions from you all. So please, please let's formulate questions and ask questions, comments, all of the above. Really critical and are all welcome. So I think, Larry, I'm going to need your help in kind of framing. So maybe you can unmute and chime. Okay. So you and I, right, last summer, while we were in the midst of COVID, and we had just finished, we were finishing up the semester online, right, began having a conversation. I think it was around Mr. Floyd's murder. I think that was the Sentinel event. And you had suggested that we gather a group of faculty and staff, and you called us the Anti-Racist Research Group, and that we begin having conversations around anti-oppression issues and do some research and have some brown bags and begin publishing in this area. That was, I think, where we started. Is that accurate, Dr. Welkowitz? Do you remember?
Gee, I bring it even back.
Okay.
I bring it back years earlier, but okay. I don't know. It's been a journey.
Yeah. It's been a journey
of quite a long time, and I often think, oh, the journey is what matters. I'm not sure we're going to achieve, some sort of ideal world of no racism and no systemic racism, but I think what I love being part of this group is that we just keep trying to figure it out, and we keep talking about it, keep generating new ideas. As Patricia said, I try to just present facts. I like that. When someone said to me, oh, you believe in critical race theory, and I say, it's not, I don't know, believe is a funny word. Or you believe in systemic racism. It's like, no, it's just something I know about. Something I know about, and you should know about it too, And so I just think, oh, we've been part of this process of just trying to know about stuff.
And thank you. And one of the outcomes was that we had decided to go talk to President Treadwell, didn't we, about other issues? But in the course of the conversation with President Treadwell, some things had happened on campus that had deeply distressed her. And we spent some time talking about those events and trying to frame, where do we go? And it was from really that really gave us a charge, don't you think, for our research group? And then we begin to think about, well, who might be interested and that kind of thing. So it was really I think this perfect storm, right? Of years of work. We've been doing years of work and recent events and things happening on campus, right? That really brought this to fruition. Right. So I just want to, I'm adding a chat. I'm responding to a chat.
Yeah, great.
So unlike, my esteemed colleagues, I'm not a scholar. I'm not an anti-oppression scholar. I simply have life experience. That's kind of where I'm coming from. Whereas I think Dr. Producer Pedroza, Gonzalez, and Dr. Burstead and Dr. Welkowitz, are scholars in this area, and mine is very much of personal experience. And so, I was horrified, right? I was horrified by all the murders. It just harkens to me, every day, folks, a person of color is murdered. And it has been murdered since the beginning of our country, right? Since the beginning of our country, centuries of daily murders. And many of these murders are legally sanctioned. That's where I come from. As a humanist, as an ethicist, as a scientist, scholar, teacher, that's where I'm located. And that's what pushed me. I've been on campus. I've taught here for 19 years. And when I first joined the campus, I began getting involved, like Dr. Pedroza Gonzalez, in this work, and have seen kind of the fits and starts over the years. But there was something about watching Mr. Floyd get murdered, right, that just did it for me. There was something about that did it for me. And that really is where we are. And, so when we talk about this question of, do we do this now? Do we wait? This is where the urgency for me comes from. Can we save lives by doing this work? I think we can save lives. We've had how many murders, right, of men of color and women of color since Mr. Floyd? We can't afford not to do this work now. That's where I locate myself in all of this work. So thank you for listening. Let's try one more round. And folks, I'm asking you, think about questions you would like to ask us. I'd like us to think about two things in this next round. Are there questions you have for each other? And are there challenges, opportunities that you'd like to highlight? As we still do have a few minutes, to talk. Challenges, opportunities, and other questions for each other. And Dr. Welkowitz, would you mind spearheading this for us?
Sure. I guess. Oh gosh, I've got too many questions. For Denise, our environmental science person. I've just been fortunate. I've been connected with some urban environmental movements in the south side of Chicago. For those of you who don't know about the south side of Chicago, it's a Hispanic region of the community right next to University of Chicago. I haven't spent a lot of time there. I just have a brother-in-law who's former assistant health commissioner of Chicago who lives there with his wife and kids, and there are all sorts of local environmental grassroots movements there. And there are these urban environmental problems. Like if people are going to stick a pencil factory somewhere, they stick it in their neighborhood. Where the kids then develop asthma, and because they're breathing all this garbage in and stuff like that. And there is a lot of activism going on in those communities. And I wonder if do you think maybe we just don't amplify those movements that are going on? All these people working on environmental projects in cities around the country, in the Bronx and in Chicago. Do they just don't have good PR, or what's No,
it's. I mean, I was just about to be glib, but I'm going to be very serious. It's racism. There's no other way to put this. The environmental movements have been racist at their foundation. So the environmental movement comes out of this idea of conservation of pristine wilderness. So most of the conservation movement is founded in a genocide against the indigenous people, removing them from places to protect them for white men. And again, I'm saying these words very seriously. I'm not trying to be glib. For white men to be able to hunt noble beasts. And so there's a genocide at the foundation. The first Earth Day, folks who wanted to participate to acknowledge, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It's not a fire alarm, it's a smoke alarm. Somebody else is cooking and it's so wonderful.
Should I ask Patricia a question instead? Okay. I'll ask, I love that. This is real life. This is Zoom. This is Zoom life. You know, my cat is encroaching on my space here. I keep pushing the cat away. Patricia.
It's super, if I can finish, I'm sorry. It's super.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
It's actually delicious food that's being prepared for me like as we speak. So, and at the same time, the chef is mortified. So anyway,
Oh, good. That's the most important thing.
But what I wanted to say, if I can finish, and I want to ask Dr. Pedroza Gonzalez the exact same question, because what is so, but to finish the Earth Day story, the folks who wanted to talk about these sorts of issues exactly that you're talking about, so much racism is embedded in decisions about the land, and folks who wanted to talk about pollution were considered not environmental enough. The Sierra Club deemed them in their survey of the membership, this was not an important environmental issue. It took basically a lawsuit, and frankly, it's still not working even today, right? So we're talking like 1970, like, well, we should be better. It's still not, these issues are not considered important enough. I mean, you know, Frederick Douglass wrote a seminal environmental paper on environmental racism, right? We don't think of someone like Frederick Douglass as one of the critical environmental thinkers. He's not in the canon. And I dare say it's because he's Black and he's looking at the issues of environmental racism, and not because of the quality of the paper, which is this incredibly seminal study of environmental racism from, long before those terms were coined. So we are, I mean, if you look at the pictures of the faces of the people who receive the Goldman Environmental Prize, so many of them are people of color. And yet we know the names of the few folks who are white men and an occasional white woman, right? Rachel Carson might be somebody who comes up, but very few folks. And it's not because they have lack of PR, it's because of the just, it's hard for me to use any other word than the racist viewpoints that have been used to build the environmental movement and the control of the land. And I also wanted to hear your perspective as well, because this goes also beyond borders from the US. And I know Dr. Pedroza Gonzalez has a lot of perspective on this too.
I really don't have anything to else, because I will go very simplistic. Yes, we know white people are nice. White people are savers. White people go and do well. No, it's like, yes and no. Human beings, we are interesting creatures, and we created some kind of things, but I don't know, I feel so repetitive in my words that even now I don't know what else to do. I don't know. I know I will not recover myself, and I'm sorry to use this political forum. Everything is political when we are in collectiveness. I will not recover myself, like the women gender studies has been practically eliminated. I will not recover myself. As I will never recover that in the United States, I'm sure I will die and I will not see a female president. And so I am teaching, and I will continue teaching with all my commitment to analyze and include complexity in the picture and in the narrative, because I believe in the future, and students will go out of King State College sometimes with no ways of navigating how to survive in LA or New York or Chicago or even Washington, DC. And here, thank you, the students present here. If you are here because you are practically obligated because a class, I appreciate and I honor you, but I'm here in campus. Let's have a cup of coffee to keep the conversation. And let's talk about how you will survive outside in a multilingual, multicultural, multiracial society, which the United States of North America. Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I just had a couple of questions for everybody. Is that okay if I ask a couple of questions for everyone? Dr. Pedroza Gonzalez, would you mind, you you kind of jumped through a couple of the slides. Would you mind just revisiting the skills slide that you showed? Would you mind showing that again? Because I think that there were other skills that were really important for us to think about. Would you mind doing that? Yeah. I think it's that one. Yeah. Would you mind? Those are really important. And you're muted. Yeah. Would you mind talking a bit about those? Because that would be great. Great, thank you. Whoops. Yeah.
All right. And so, well, first, I'm talking about critical thinking. I cannot separate things. And clearly, I consider I teach anti-racist material, but I will say, for example, recognizing values and sexist, anti-racist, homophobic, or transphobic ideas in my own discipline and in my own learning, it takes the reflection. If I'm a teacher and I teach whatever subject, but I'm a student and I'm studying a lot of subjects, this is a reflective, but and so after I reflect on that, how really I deconstruct. And so it's a skill, I need practice. We do that with intersectional analysis. Obviously, I did women gender studies. And so it's like, yes, we have introduction to women gender studies. And so intersectionality is a core concept. But I said to my students, I can say about intersectionality today, and tomorrow I discover another thing. And so the skill is a practice. The skills are practices. We are never experts in these kind of things, and more what society is moving. Other thing is that these kind of skills are politically charged. That means it's exactly because they emerge. For example, these kind of studies are different in the way how we need to study the history of academia. It's not so hard. It's not so hard to know why math, English, and writing is still been at the center of the skills. It's not so hard to investigate why. But for example, and I'm not saying it's not important, it's very important, but why they are at the center of education, that is not hard to learn. I studied that in high school, but that's another story. But it is a skill means like it's a permanently. These kind of studies are a result of specific social confrontations. And so we insert that, it's not fixed. And so what we say anti-racist skill today, it may be different in 2 years, or it may be different tomorrow. And so how do you develop that curiosity? How do you develop that permanent thinking? And I say it's a skill. It's don't think that you will go to one course and you will get it. However, understanding the mechanism is different. I use this metaphorical. I need to use metaphorical things. I said, if we have alcoholism, and believe me, I drink wine, okay? And so I'm alcoholic already. If we have alcoholism, we need to sell alcohol in order to keep the business of alcohol. It's a business. Humans love it, but we need to sell and buy and consume alcohol. We live in racist structures, so we need to keep the policies in racist ways in order to keep the racist system. And so we live in sexist structures. As I teach about first, the dichotomy, first world, third world. And we are accustomed, like Western first world women are free. We are free. I said, oh yes, sure. Let's go and run with short and topless. We will be arrested. No, we don't have control of our bodies. A man can run in a short and topless. Nothing will happen, nothing. But a woman will do it, she will be arrested. And so questioning this kind, we need to keep our sexist bodies, gender dynamics in order to keep that mechanism. And so it's very important to understand the mechanism from my individual thing, and the skill is navigating this analysis.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pedroza Gonzalez. All of those skills are critically important. The ones that stick with me are the curiosity, right? This is the world of the intellect, curiosity. This is why students, I think, come to college and take the courses they do, curiosity. This is why we develop professions and visions for ourselves, curiosity. And so I'm so happy that students can hear that curiosity is really at the center of this work. The other piece is the difficult conversations as a skill, right? I think that, and being comfortable with discomfort as another skill. These are critical pieces. And students, if you're interested in receiving training on having difficult conversations, which I think, frankly, many employers like employees that can demonstrate these skills, reach out to us. We can help you get training in terms of having these difficult conversations. So just, put that on your radar screen, perhaps, of possibilities. And then I wanted to ask Dr. Bridgestead and Dr. Walkowitz just to think about a bit with me about just an observation that that both of you, it seems that you both talked about these seminal themes, and I think Dr. Pedroza Gonzalez framed this for us: themes of exclusion, themes of otherness, themes of discrimination, themes of power, themes of gaps of information. And Dr. Bridgestead, your hands up.
Yeah, I also, I wanted to comment just quickly on what we just heard, and then maybe I'm worried that we'll lose your thoughts. So if we can go back to what you were asking, that would be great. But I just wanted to say that in my experience in the environmental field, folks who were able and ready to work with people in the environmental profession who want, there's a big awakening in the environmental profession, recognizing how harmful the actions that we're doing might be. The environmental field is a great place for people who like to be seen as not racist. Maybe, like you'll hear a lot of people say, I'm not racist, but those sorts of things those phrases will come up a lot. And that's being recognized. And frankly, the folks who have the skills that we were just shown on that slide and we were just hearing about have been frustrated because they have too much work. Frankly, they're stretched totally to the max. There's not enough people with these skills right now to work with the people in these other fields. So, and this gets into the restorative justice minor, restorative practices minor as well. People who have these skills, like the ones that we were just looking at, the restorative practices skills, actually are finding themselves extremely marketable because there's a lot of work that needs to be done and people are recognizing it and wanting to pay people who can do that work.
Thank you so much, because that really dovetails with the question I have really for Dr. Walkowitz and Dr. Bridgestead and Dr. Pedroza Gonzalez is, given all of these, the exclusion, the gaps of knowledge, all of these dynamics, the alienation and vulnerability and fear, right? Dr. Walkowitz talks about, and the struggles, and with Dr. Bridgestead and her discipline, but yet the awakening that happens. Where do we go from here, I guess, is the next question. What do we need to go from here? I guess, Dr. Bridgestead, I'm hearing that in your interdisciplinary work, the need is for people who have skills to step forward and people to develop skills to step forward. Is that an accurate characterization of where we need to go from here?
Yeah, I'll just say yes, I agree. Yeah.
And Dr. Walkowitz, what would you?
Well, I love that, I love the moving from the personal to the, in the chat, we said is personal, political, what we see in our relationships with just our friends, our loved ones, we also see play out on larger systems, right? And, Dr. Jennings, I talk about Escape from Freedom and Existentialism by, Eric Fromm. And, so you look at you look at a personal relationship with a loved one, and do you have an equal relationship? Is this really a democratic relationship? Or is one person dictating what the other person should think? This is what you should think. This is what you should feel. This is what you should wear. These are the foods you should eat. That's a kind of, Fromm called that a kind of sadism. And people who agreed to receive that was a kind of masochism. And we see that playing out in larger systems. Who are the sadists and who are the masochists? And to be political, because I'm experiencing this at the state level, when we pass one of the most restrictive abortion laws that say, it's one thing to say you don't like abortion, you think abortion's okay or not okay, but to require an invasive ultrasound before a woman can have an abortion is sadistic. It's not a medically necessary thing. No doctor wants to do that, but you got a group of people who are saying, no, we're going to do this to women. We're literally committing sexual assault on women, to do this. And then this plays out the personal and the larger scale issue. I'm going to tell you who you are. I'm going to tell you what to think on a large scale. So I think the next step is to bridge that gap and study that gap between personal and systemic. Anyway, I hope that's
Thank
helpful.
you so much.
Yeah.
And I think Janet has a question that I think really provides laser focus on our conversation and really these final remarks we're making. Is there a danger that having people with these skills explicitly letting others off the hook to do the work and therefore lead to no change? What do you think, folks? What do you think? What a powerful question. Denise, you were.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in with my experience on this. When this is done well, what I'm seeing is people with these skills are facilitating community-wide discussions so that everybody is being brought to these difficult concepts and practicing reckoning with very difficult concepts and reckoning with themselves for not being as good as we might wish we were. So the people who really have these skills are facilitating these conversations in whole communities. And I'm reckoning with this like literally right now, and I would love to like babble for another hour about some work that I'm doing I won't, but I will just thumbnail that work that's going on right now with a research organization that I'm a part of on land that's considered pristine, therefore land that is currently managed as a result of genocide. And the ecosystem scientists who study this land are beginning to reckon with this. And we're planning out years to see if the community as a whole can. I could have just used the word reckon again. It's the only word that really comes up. And maybe another phrase that I like for the work that we're doing right now is to live as good neighbors with the people who still remain here. So I as part of the acknowledgement that people of the Wabanaki Confederacy are still here, they're still our neighbors. And the work that's being done can still be in service of them. And if we would shut up for a minute and listen to what they need, by we, I mean the white scientists who've inherited this benefit of the genocide, if they would stop being the experts for a moment and listen, we can work together. And so that is where these skills become really valuable in terms of repairing, hundreds of years of genocide. And so it's not so much that one person can do this, it's going to take the whole community.
Denise, someone recently introduced me to Evo Morales, I think he's still the president of Bolivia, who talks about living well versus living better. Like we should all be able to live well, we don't have to live better than our neighbors, but we're in this continuous battle to, I have a house, I need a bigger house, I need a bigger house, right? Right. That we're all in this, you know, we should all be able to, all of us should be able to live well, right? That should be the goal. Yeah.
And this is the heart, as we close, of the anti-racist studies. It's an invitation, it's a call to an interdisciplinary consciousness where we all can live well. That's what we're inviting you to engage in. So we just have a couple of minutes, folks. Anybody want to chime in with any other questions? Students, do you want to ask anything? Dr. Welch and Dr. Quayle, did you all have closing thoughts or requests for your students, or?
I just have a general sort of question for you guys, and that is, if a student is interested in the Anti-Racist Studies program, or finding out more about it, who should they talk to? I'm gathering any member of this panel for sure, and you know, would faculty, is that where faculty should steer people, is to one of you four?
Yes, Dr. Birchstead and I are co-sponsoring this program, but any of us would be wonderful choices for students to come and chat.
Okay.
Yeah, if you see us on campus, just approach us. And, you know, I know it's harder now these days, but, and you might not recognize us with a mask on, but, you know, email us, call us, drop by for sure.
Okay. Well, I have, you know, questions I would not mind pursuing individually with you guys,
Okay.
but is there, if there's not anyone else out there who has a question, we are getting close to 7:30, and that's usually wrap up time. So going once, going twice on other questions. Wait, I think I see a hand up. Chris Perfetto, yep. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Well, I guess it's kind of hard to formulate a question. I want to thank you guys for the very thorough presentation. I think with the information provided, it's almost easier to walk away with a thorough understanding that I feel like I can explain to someone else. So rather than ask a question, I just want to compliment your speaking and say thank you, because now I have like a good understanding of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think that sounds like a good note to end on. Thank you, Chris. And I will invite people to join us next week. I think Caitlin Parmalee is going to be talking about math and neural networks, something completely different, but something that, you know, applies to this conversation in a way, I'm sure. And so if you are interested, you can join the same Zoom link next week, or you can come to the library 240 upstairs. There's usually room, even at COVID distancing, as long as you can get onto campus buildings. So with that, I'll say good night and thank you to the people in our panel. Good night.